session, which will focus on the impacts and challenges of use cases for both people and goods for connected cooperative automated mobility, or short CCAM. So my name is Stefan Dreher. I'm Senior Manager at Ertico ITS Europe for CCAM and leading the Cluster 7 of the CCAM Partnership on Coordination. And this topic is a very important one for coordination, because aligning as well on the use cases and the needs for that is a part of the coordination activities. So normally I was supposed to show here the two moderators, so we will basically split this session in two parts. So in the first part, we will have a series of 5 presentations focusing on the presentations of some practical examples of use cases. So it can be either experiences with RNI, demonstrations, or practical implementations. We will have a very short questions and answer of about 10-15 minutes. After that, really focusing only on clarifications of these presentations. And our idea is that in this first part, we really focus on the why, so on the expected impacts. Why are we working on these use cases? Why are we deploying them? And then we will switch over to a second part where we will add, so the 5 panel speakers will stay on the stage, and we will add 3 additional panelists representing different sectors and different views, and we will change the moderator to spice up the things a bit. And in this part, we want to discuss a bit the challenges and really go a bit deeper into what needs to be done next. Perfect. That's it. So before we start, perfect timing for the slides. So indeed, so I already introduced myself, and Tom Alkim, who will moderate the second part, will introduce himself in the second part. So before we start, I just wanted to give you a bit more background to explain why we have set up this session. So first, so this is an analysis that we are doing in the FAME project based on the knowledge base that was already mentioned several times in the past sessions. So what you see here in the left is an overview of the different use cases. I mean, we are calling them use cases, but of course it can be sometimes functions or just scenarios that are being tested and that are being sometimes also researched in a more operational environment. And in blue is the European funded projects, so that's since Horizon 2020, so already since 2014, and as well what is being done at member states level, so funded by the member states directly. And I don't expect you to find any pattern there. I mean, the idea is just to show that we are really doing a lot of testing, a lot of demonstration, and maybe we need a little bit of focus, trying to see where are there already synergies, where are there common things that we are doing, why are we doing all this testing, do we need to do more, should we maybe build on top of some of these use cases and some of these experimentations, combine them, and really look into the next steps. What we can see on the right figure is showing a bit also the environments of the testings, again with EU-funded testing and member states testing. So what we see is that there are a bit more trials ongoing on highway use cases from European projects, but then member states are very active in trials on urban environments, in rural and suburban environments, and as well in mixed traffic. And then EU projects are obviously testing as well on the cross-border too, which is another of the challenges we will talk about. At the moment, this is all based on nearly 400 projects that we are continuously analyzing. And in order to identify now what needs to be done next, there's a current ongoing exercise in the CCAM partnership. So you already heard about the SRIA update yesterday. So as part of that, there's also a common exercise with the AirTrack to now look into specific use cases and what needs to be the focus of the next large-scale demonstrations. So there's the use cases have been split up here about innovation, with what is in development stage and what is really still research. And here, I mean, I will not go into details, but just to show that we have the connected services, for example, that can enhance current services just with additional digital information. There are then the highway use cases. Then we have parking and confined areas, and then finally as well urban traffic for both people and goods, and in which seems to have the most societal impacts. So with this very short introduction, I would not like to hold further our presenters. So we have invited 5 speakers, which are really experts in their field, to present and introduce 5 different use cases. I just show their picture here, but I will of course briefly introduce them once they will come to the stage, and then they will join here for the short question and answer afterwards. So I would just like to start with our first speaker, which is Dr. Nataza Milicic, and she's Technical Product Manager, Mobility Experience for Self-Driving Cars at the BMW Group. And Nataza here will speak about the automotive and highway use case.
Hello. I'm quite happy to be able to present you our approach. We are heading toward automated driving also, like all other participants in this conference. And I'm a kind of advocating this one. Well, I'm usually advocating for the customer during our development, and that's the reason why I will show you some approaches of ours. So we started analyzing trips of our customers, and nearly 1 billion trips analyzed, and from 1 million different cars. And we could structure them in 2 different big groups, and 81% of all drives are commute journeys or errand journeys. And commute means it's your way to your work and vice versa. And these journeys are usually between 50 and 80 kilometers long, and the duration is usually between 30 and 45 minutes. We found out that most of our customers live in suburban areas and work somewhere in the urban field or in a downtown. And the second part of the journeys, these are errand journeys. These are all-day life journeys. You have to make your trips just to pick the kids from the school or just go to the gym. All these shorter journeys around your home. And the main point is we try to dig deeper into the data and then analyze the different street types our customers have to drive. And one of the main or longest parts is the highway, 15 to 20 minutes every day. And the second big part is the urban freeway with the traffic jam on it. So everyday life. And as you can see from the slides, the commute journey consists or contains all the parts of an errand use case also. So that's the reason why I will focus just on the commute journey on the further slides. And then we realized, can you make the next slide, please? When you try to understand what's happening on the way, we need a little bit more insight from the customer. What are their needs? What are their pain points? What are their gains? And I will show you a brief overview of the things we found out. At the beginning, they start in the suburban environment, deal with slow road users, have some intersections and give right-of-way situations. Then on the rural road, there's usually a traffic and a dense traffic during the rush hour in the morning. And then they end up on the highway. There's a changing traffic conditions and a wide range of speed. And what we found out is that the people are quite satisfied when at the end of the highway, they had a good flow experience. And then they end up in a stop-and-go traffic. And the feeling is quite annoying. You're wasting your time. And this is one of the dominant feelings or impressions people have from the journey, although it's not the longest one. At the end, they end up in an urban environment. They have to deal with intersections, a lot of road users. Guess what? The last use cases are 100% use case. Every single trip ends with a parking situation. It's quite obvious, but it's important to understand how big this issue is. And I would like to give you some insights. What are our answers to all these challenges of our customers during his ride? And I would like to mention that we have 2 main criteria to decide what's the next point to develop. The first one, it has to meet a need of the customer to get some value from the function. And the second one, our goal is to have or to create the best experience. And having these two criteria, it's quite easy or obvious to decide what's the next point to develop. So the first one is you need a kind of basement of our functional building. This is a good active cruise control and a good lane keeping assistant through the whole journey. And then you can start adding new features to build up or to meet other use cases. And especially for rural conditions and rural roads, we integrated automated speed limit assist, which is able to adapt the speed of the system according to the traffic signs beside the road, the speed limits. And then when we end up on the highway, as I already mentioned, the main goal is to create a good flow experience. And there we have two new functions I would like to mention. The first one is our level 2 highway assistant, and during this drive, you can just put your hands off the steering wheel, and as long as you're attentive, as long as you're observing the traffic, you can just let the car drive by itself. Through this 15 to 20 minutes drive, you can just sit there and observe. And it's quite convenient, and to push this experience even further, we have a lane change assistant, and the special about this lane change assistant is he's observing the traffic, and as when you have a slower vehicle in front of you and none on the left side, it recommends you a lane change to overtake the slower vehicle. And you can just, when you look in the side mirror to check the traffic behind you, the car initiates the lane change. So it's kind of magic. As soon as you look over to the left side, the car follows your gaze. And these two functions together create a really good experience on the highway. And after this kind of drive, you're quite satisfied. And then you end up on the urban freeway. And as I mentioned, the people have the feeling of wasting their time. And the most benefit is not to waste the time, to gain some time. That's the reason why we're working on a level 3 personal pilot, up to 60 kilometers per hour. Then when we have realized this function, and it's also one of the attract use cases Stefan mentioned before, our customers will be able to watch a video during this part of the ride, and will be able to prepare their presentation or whatever else. So they're gaining their time instead of wasting the time. And then when we end up on the urban area, we have an urban cruise control with traffic light detection, which is able to also to adapt the speed due to the traffic lights. And then we end up in the 100% use case, which is parking. And we have several functions, but I would like to mention two of them. The first one is parking finder. Well, it helps you to find a parking lot near your destination. And we have our outlook or our vision, which is level 4 automated valet parking, which is also an attract use case. And the most convenient way we could imagine how to solve this use case is to get to a garage, get out of the car drives itself away, parks itself away, and you just go to your work. And after a long working day, you just come back to this area, and the car drives itself out of the parking lot and picks you up, and then you can drive off. And this is the last use case I would like to mention, and I hope I was able to show you that we are trying to develop evolutionary, piece for piece, along the needs of the customer, and try to create a good experience. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nat. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Natasha, for this brief but in fact-based overview of the customer journey and the solutions that BMW is building to address the customer needs. So here the why is clear. It's the customer needs and requirements and expectations. So yeah, we will have time for the questions and answers for after all the presentations. So if you have some, keep them for after. So I would like to call the next speaker to the stage. So that's Biagio Ciuffo, who is Scientific Officer at the European Commission, the Joint Research Center, and where he leads the research group on smart mobility and the GRC Living Lab for future mobility solutions. Biagio, the floor is yours. Like that.
Please. Here. Great. Thanks, Stefan. So good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. Let me start by thanking, first of all, the colleagues in the European Commission who organized this event. I don't know if you agree with me, but for me it's really a timely moment to have an event like this. And then, of course, Tom and Stefan for inviting me to this session. It has been mentioned a few times during these 2 days, but I have to say that I've been really the privilege to participate together with Christina, Anthony, and the colleagues from the GRC and the European Commission to the development and to the adoption of, the achievement of 2 really big milestones in the field of automated driving system and connected automated mobilities. And this relates to the adoption of 2 important pieces of regulation. One is Regulation 157 UNEC, which is basically a scope extension, a significant scope of extension for the so-called automated lane keeping system. And then the Regulation 1426 2002 European level for the type approval of level 4 automated driving systems. These 2 regulations were key in order to enable at the European level the type approval, so introduction to the market of the 2 use cases on which I'll focus my attention in the next couple of minutes. First of all, the level 4 hub-to-hub system. So we are talking about fully automated vehicles designed for the carriage of passengers or of goods on predefined routes with fixed origin and destination. So to imagine you have 2 hubs in Europe, wherever they are, and you design your system to be able to safely navigate in automated mode between these 2 points and the infrastructure connecting them. And then the level 3 automated lane keeping system, which is basically not any longer a lane keeping system in the sense that the amendment that was introduced was to enable the fully automation on highway system at level 3. So still with the presence of a driver. So a driver arrives on a motorway in a highway where the system is designed within the ODD of the system. Enable the system. If the system realizes that it can drive on that road, it switch on, and then it takes responsibility of driving until it reaches the boundaries of the ODD or until the driver decided to take back control. I think Natasha before has clearly mentioned why, from an industry perspective, this is an added value. These type of system have an added value. And for those reasons, which we clearly agree upon, personally, I believe that these are also the type of system which are closest to reach market. And the reason is that we are focusing on highways, so a more codified environment, a limited number of road use types with which the system could interact, so also a smaller number of scenarios. We have also longer experience by OEMs on, let's say, similar system with, of course, lower automation level, like the ACC, lane keeping, and so on and so forth. And we believe this is also the system with a clear and probably shorter term business case. So as mentioned, reduction, so improving driving experience, reduction in delivery costs, higher transportation productivity with the possibility to run the system longer and in a more continuous way when it comes to freight delivery. But why we, from the regulatory perspective, we're so keen to support development legislation in this field? Of course, to support industry and business development, but of course, because we, as in Europe, believe that automated driving system within a SICAM ecosystem introduce also higher societal benefits. I not even mention the benefits in terms of safety. So these are key tools to achieve the Vision Zero of the European Commission, so reducing the accident on the roads. But, as also was mentioned before, reducing the travel stress, reducing the perceived travel time cost is also likely to contribute to relax the driving experience, relax the driver while driving, lead to a reduced acceleration, deceleration frequencies. So these in turn may lead to reducing travel speed, fuel consumption. What is even more important for highway, reduce the number of lane changes. You may have all experienced, at least I always experience while driving southward from the north to the south of Italy, these trucks overtaking another truck to gain 1 or 2 kilometers per hour, and you understand why it's basically creating a queue of several kilometers behind just for these additional aspects. So if you have an automated driving system, this will simply not happen. So at the end of the day, not only improve the overall traffic flow, which in turn also reduce the risk of accident for the other road users. So there is, on one point, the safety improvement due to the fact that the system is always able to, hopefully thank also to the type approval to supervise the situation around, but also to the overall risk due to the interaction with the other road users. Then in Regulation 157, we were also able to introduce, after quite some discussion, the issue of string stability, which is also a property that automated driving system could support in the future to make, let's say, traffic flow smoother and able to absorb, to a certain extent, shock waves and other types of flow instability. So in turns, over time, this could also improve the traffic flow dynamics and patterns. And finally, as a possible additional added value, especially for freight delivery, when you have long-haul journeys connecting 2 points of Europe, the possibility to use, not needing to rely on a driver, having to be there continuously attentive, could also induce operators to choose off-peak hours, which are not only good for the business perspective, but also because are the moment in which the interaction with other road users are less likely, and also the automated driving system could benefit from, let's say, an emptier road to drive in. These are the, let's say, if you want, the short-term benefits. So of automated driving system, able to navigate autonomously on the road, but more or less on their own, so without really necessarily integration within the transport system. What we expect in the future, in the longer term, is in fact the transition between ADS, the concept of a vehicle that alone does all these improvements by its own features, to SICA, because in Europe this is what we are talking about. We talk about a cooperative, connected, automated mobility. So the possibility to interact with other road users, in this case, in the case of highway application, with the vehicle around and the infrastructure. Again, many perspectives are the vision of this interaction and this cooperation able to make the flow more efficient. This is true. But what is even more, let's say, interesting from a transportation perspective is that by introducing automated driving system connected with the infrastructure, you are enabling, in a way, an indirect, better management of the highway transportation system. Why? Because the first requirement set into the regulation is that they have to respect traffic rules. So if a road authority says they have to go at 100 kilometers per hour because for whatever reason the speed limit is reduced to 100 kilometers per hour, they will go at 100 kilometers per hour. And in this way affecting the overall traffic flow upstream and downstream. So in a way, they become enabler of better traffic management. And what we have to do is to follow the evolution, support the deployment of connectivity, integrate the vehicle in the broader mobility system that in the, let's say, probably not short, but in the medium short term could really have an important impact on highway driving in Europe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Biagio, for your presentation and for also highlighting these two use cases and why you are focusing on these for the ADS regulations. And you hinted already to some of the challenges like the integration into CCAM that we will discuss certainly later. So our third speaker is Dr. Ragnhild Wahl, who is Director for Research and Innovation at ITS Norway. And she's coordinating the EU-funded MODI project and will present now the automated freight transport use case.
Yeah, it works. Thank you, Stefan, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel discussion. I'm Ragnhild Wahl from ITS Norway, as you said, and I'm coordinating one of the new large-scale demonstration projects. And to set this into a context, we are focusing on logistic, freight transport. I guess most of the speakers during these 2 days have been focusing on passenger transport. So just to give you a little context, what are we aiming at? Four of the challenges in the logistics where we think that automation could make a major difference is related to the cost level. It's the time-consuming activities. It's the shortage of drivers. And last but not least, it's the traffic safety. And we have already heard a few words about these challenges already. But just a few words about two of them. There's driver shortage is an increasing challenge. Already we see there's a serious lack of drivers, but it's supposed or expected to increase significantly in the future. So we need to overcome this. Oh, does this work? I can? It works? Yeah, good. Much easier. We are aiming at, we have three main ambitions in the project. And the first is have a starting point in the logistics sector. It's the big why. It's how to create new business models within logistics. We are not introducing automated freight transport for the case of automation, even though all of us technology nerds, for so to say, are very eager in automation. But they're really, on the long run, it's the new business models to make business, and of course also serving the society. The next ambition is to accelerate the adoption of highly automated freight vehicles. And that means we need to focus both on the vehicles, developing them, making them capable of driving level 4, because we are addressing level 4, but also how to adopt and adjust the infrastructure, both the physical and the digital part, to serve automated driving. And last, it's the demonstrations. We are a large-scale demonstration project, and we will demonstrate a lot of use cases. We have selected 5 of them. I will present all of them. But we focus on both confined areas and public roads. So these are the 5 use cases. we have selected the corridor from Rotterdam in the Netherlands to Oslo in Norway. Our ambition is to drive the whole route. And of course, nobody in this audience believes that we are able to drive the whole route L4 during our 3.5-year long project, but we will drive in a shadow mode. So we will simulate the driving, we will collect data to gain knowledge about the challenges by driving such a long road, crossing such many countries. And to start in the north, in Norway, I'm from Norway, and we are outside the Union. So when you cross the border to Sweden, you also cross the border from outside to inside the Union. That means a lot of challenges regarding tolling. And that's activities which are carried out by the drivers today. So the Norwegian use case is about how to deal with this border crossing, but also how to drive on public road and which requirements do you need to place on the infrastructure. When we come to Sweden, we will focus on the hub-to-hub challenges. Here we will also focus on operations within the terminal, that is loading and unloading. We will also focus on automated charging and the challenges when you are approaching the confined area from a public area. So how to make this gate control also. In Germany, we are in Hamburg. Oh, I didn't say that, but in Sweden it's in Gothenburg. In Germany, we will go to Hamburg and we will drive from motorway to confined areas. And here we will have a specific focus on traffic safety and vulnerable road users. In the Netherlands, we are addressing the APM terminal in Rotterdam Harbour. And here we will mainly focus on the confined area, how to operate these driverless L4 vehicles together with the automated guided vehicles which are already running in the terminal. But we will also focus on the triage from the terminal to warehouses. So these are the 5 use cases, quite challenging. We have 3 main vehicle providers. The first is the traditional, conventional kind of trucks, which is from Volvo and also from DAF. These are the kind of trucks we all are used to see on the roads, except from now they have fully battery electric running and also will be adjusted to the needs for L4 to a various degree. But we also have the Swedish quite new company named Enride, which have a total new kind of freight vehicles. These are kind of pods without a driver seat. So it's a mix of very different kind of vehicles. We are approaching or foreseeing 6 main key results. The first is the vehicles ready for demonstrating L4. The second is the interface for coordinating CCAM vehicles. The third is the design and requirements for the physical and digital infrastructure. The fourth is the new business models, vital business models, as I said in the introduction. Then we have the impacts to the society, which we already had a few examples of, so I won't go into that. And finally, we will develop a book of recommendation on how to adapt the infrastructure, how to regulate. We also go into the need for standardization, etc. We have, I'm probably running out of time, I'm almost finished. We have 34 partners. We are representing 8 countries. We started in October and will run until March 2026. And as you can see, we have the whole value chain included in the project, but we lack one important kind of companies, and that is the telecom. So we have introduced telecom in our stakeholder board group, so that we have the full community. Also, the public authorities and industrial partners. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ragnhild, for this very interesting overview and of the challenging MODI project. And I think indeed the freight transport sector is one where we don't need much to be convinced that there is a why indeed as to automation, as there are many inefficiencies indeed you need to address. So now we go to the shuttles and to the urban and rural use cases. So our next speaker is Nicolas Maresco, who is Deputy Director of Meeting Customer Needs and Innovation at Massif, a NAEMA group, and he leads the Moving On Autonomous Vehicle Community of Interest in France. So Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Yes, it is. However, when you're speaking about autonomous vehicles, what are you thinking about? A young white collar going to his job in Brussels in his individual car? How did you come here today? You could use taxi, PDB in French, it's your feet, bikes. So what would be the use in a city of autonomous vehicles? Why an insurer, Massif in France, would work on these topics? Because we are insurers, and there is some new risks, from individual risks to serial risks. If you've got a bug, maybe 1,000 cars may be damaged. But we are also mutualist, which is what would be the best use case for customers. It would be, in our opinion, in rural or peri-urban territories. But would a single insurer work on this? No way. That's why we used, great. The Moving On Community of Interest. This is a worldwide first open innovation hub on sustainable mobility. And you mentioned telecom, so we're working, for instance, with Orange. We're also working with Microsoft and about infrastructure, so with Vinci, with Michelin, and SNCF, etc. And even others, insurers. What? Competitors? Yes, because at the time, it's really about emerging this concept. Later on, we may compete on this. And we're also working with France Assureur, with Insurance Europe, on this topic together to enhance safety on the roads. Today, we just released our benchmark, a worldwide benchmark about experiments on autonomous shuttles worldwide and also on robotaxis. What can we say roughly? Europe is on the lead, whether in Germany and in France, because France is a land of experimentation. And as Olivier Gaveau said, it's thanks to the regulation. Two actors, Navia and EasyMart, are French, are leading most of the experiments. However, you can see on the graph that there was a peak in 2018, and then something happened. But it's not the only reason, because we are moving from a single day, single shuttle on a single line to more experiences, pilot of services on an area and on different, with more vehicles. And in the future, maybe a mix for business models reasons between people and goods. We ask also customers. In 3 years, we asked 12,000 French citizens about their acceptability about autonomous vehicles. Okay, fine. And the more you see them, the more they practice them, the more you like them. But we made also a worldwide first with asking 1,000 elected officials in France. Why? Because elected officials are in the first league when it's about knowing the customers' and citizens' needs. However, they are in the last league when it's what can I do about it? That's why your knowledge base at the European level is important, and we are working with the French authorities about a one-stop shop for them about all this information. Why? And but also, how could I do it? And when we ask them, 10 out of 100 say this is BS. What, this is only technology for technology. I don't care. Put your money elsewhere. 1 out of 4 said, great, it's great. I've got a disability people. I've got senior citizens who are too old to drive. I've got young people who are too young to drive also. Great of them. The good news is 2 out of 3 are saying, yes, it's interesting, but for everybody in my community, in my region. You've got some differences. For instance, when you're asking about the French, they say, okay, when I'm thinking about individual autonomous vehicles, it's about individual cars. Fortunately, our elected officials think about community, and 8 out of 10 prefer shared autonomous mobility, even if BMW works well for individual cars. And 15% of them are plan on developing these elements. And I have many questions. Should we have a corridor for my next urban plan? Can we make the shuttle drive on the regular road, etc., etc. And okay, it's now the time to go from ambition and theory to action. That's why, thanks among our community of 12 members, 4 of them, Betty, which is a mobility operator, Vinci, which is an infrastructure operator, Navia, building some shuttles, and Massif, are working on switching on a single shuttle, single line, to an area of almost 20 square miles, 7 shuttles, in a mix between people and goods. And one of the key challenges is going to build a sustainable mobility model for a more inclusive and sustainable mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for this overview and the very interesting benchmarking exercise. Quite challenging as well. So our last speaker is bringing in the international experience. That's Dr. Yu-Yun Choi, who is principal researcher, lab leader at the Korea Automotive Technology Institute, KTEC. The floor is yours.
Okay. So how many minutes do I have? Okay, so thank you very much for having me here at the International Research Institute to sharing the research experience regarding the automated charting. So I'm Yu-Jun Choi from Korea Automotive Technology Institute. So it is my honor to be here for present about the development of the low-speed automated shuttle in public road situations in Korea. So, go. Yep. Okay. I'm sorry, but the presenter is not the automated, so. Okay, so actually, so there are two the use cases in Korea. The first one is the first one is the for the last mile and tourism the services, and then second one is the for the postal delivery services. So I'm gonna talk about something shortly. Okay, yeah, it goes. All right. Okay, so in Korea, so there are the regulations to testing and operating the automated vehicle technologies in the public roads. So there are three types of the vehicles, but first one is the passenger vehicles, and second one is the automated shuttles, and last one is the special purpose the vehicles. So for the testing the automated shuttles, we do a lot of the approved by the Korean government in terms of the functionality of the automated vehicles, and then the maximum speed of the vehicle. So yes, go. So by the way, so okay, it stops. Can you go back? No, it stops. Okay, so for the technical reasons, so I'm just briefly introduce about the two use cases. So the first one is the more focusing on the last mile and then the tourism services in Korea. So we are waiting for the screen is coming. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. So since the 2021, we did a lot of Can you go to the presentation mode, please? Yep. Okay, it goes. I help. Okay. So since the 2021, we did a lot of tests in the public road situations. So for realizing this kind of the technologies, we think about the three functionalities in terms of the service and the AV functionalities, and then the infrastructure supported. So for the service, the functionalities, we are providing the static bus stop for the scheduled services, and then the dynamic bus stop for the on-demand services. And in terms of the AV functionalities, we developed the lane changes or roundabout and left turn with the manual permissions and automated right turns and vision-based intersection, the crossings are also developed. And then lastly, for the infrastructure supported the functionalities, we also developing the VTEX supported the intersection crossings and infrastructure supported the VRU crossing warning technologies. So the second, the use case is the untagged postal delivery services. Since the postal delivery is the universal services to be provided to all the citizens in the world, even though they are living in the urban areas or they are living in the rural areas. So that is why we are providing these kind of services based on the low-speed shuttles. So as you can see here, we can developing the low-speed shuttles with the postal delivery machines. So we did the real the road environment tested, and then providing services to some citizens who live in the Sejong city, which is a new capital city in Korea. So as you can see here, we choose the specific test areas, and then we providing the two services. The first one is the on-schedule services, And then second one is the on-demand services, which is a real-time call of the postal delivery AV shuttles. So for realizing that services, that use cases, we are deploying the communication, the technologies. First one is the C-ITEST, which is the wavelength DSRC in Korea, but the ITEST G5 in Europe, and then also for the 5G technologies. And then we also developing the automated intersection crossing based on the C-ITEST communications, and also we are providing the VRU collision warning systems for the the road safeties. And then lastly, we are also developing the monitoring and services for providing these services to the citizens. So actually, so this is the two use cases that we have developed and tested in the real world situation in Korea, and we experienced some challenges regarding CCAM technologies in the public road. And actually, that is coming from my grandfather in mind, and then I'm just following his thoughts. So first one is we need human operators, right? And then we need to think about how can we remove the human operators in the automated vehicles. The third one is we need to make AID speed up the vehicles, right? And then last one is the advanced VTEX and then cybersecurity technologies, right? And then fulfill these four kind of technologies, we finally reach to the fully automated Avengers, the vehicles. So this is just for fun, for just wake up your sleeping, and I'm gonna just give up about the expected effect because we have plenty time to discuss about panel discussions. So thank you very much for your time, and then I'm waiting for my discussion in the panels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Choi, for this also personal notes. Okay, so now we have, after this presentation, we have some time for quick question and answers. So I would like to, as we want to make it interactive, I would like to open the floor to you from the audience. So at the moment, as we said, we want to have some clarifying questions. So if you have any specific questions on what has been presented, if you have questions now on the more deeper in the challenges for the discussion, you can still, but keep the question for maybe the panel discussion. So is there any burning clarification? Yes, Christophe.
Hello, Christophe Rambaud from Belgium, to the lady of BMW. I found it very interesting to see that there's also a plan to support traffic lights. As you might know, there are some projects ongoing, even deployment projects with connected traffic lights. Is it a plan to just read the color of the lens with a camera, or is the plan rather to really connect to the digital backbone and communicate directly with the traffic light controller, which would be more good in terms of tactical planning of the drive?
Is it working? Yeah. Okay. The first step is just the recognition via camera, and the second step is then to use the infrastructure. And we're always trying to have a feature which is always available, and then as the infrastructure is getting up, then we will use both.
Okay. Is clarifying? Is it answer your question? Yes. Okay. Good. Any other? Yes. Henriette.
To follow up also for Natasha from BMW, I was a bit surprised, and I think it matches with the introduction of Nicolas about this vision of having the private car from the rural area driving all the way to downtown center. Is BMW talking, when it's about automated vehicles, of more going towards shared options? I know that back then there was all the Drive Now discussions, and I've heard that maybe from a business perspective was not so interesting. But yeah, I wonder if there is still discussion around that, of maybe at least, if it's not sharing the assets of the vehicle, at least connecting within the city center to other modes, like this multimodality of vehicles to have more like positive environmental impact. So yeah, I would be curious how it fits all together and with all the discussions that we have here also towards more like sustainable mobility.
Yeah, at the moment we are not focusing on sharing. So we have the Drive now, and it's a cooperation now with Mercedes, and our core value is at the moment just to try to sell the cars to our customers. So the focus shifted during the last period.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on that indeed, because for me, I mean, the service that you are collecting data from the customer needs. So is it done through surveys as well, and are you also considering or opening it broader to understand the customer needs, or are you sharing this exercise with others as well?
Well, I'm not really quite sure in which kind of data are we sharing, but we have some cooperations with other automotive and also not automotive corporations where we share the data, but I'm not really sure which kind of data we are sharing with who.
Okay. Yeah, because indeed, I mean, Nicola indeed highlighted that there's this need to cooperate on this vision and to have the broader mobility picture. So yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. If you can. Is it working? Yes.
Thanks. About data, it's a really interesting question because today you're driving your car and your windshield wipers start. So maybe it's raining. So it would be interesting from an insurer perspective that the car behind me and the one 1 mile behind would be able to know that's more precisely than a global weather forecast what's happening. So sharing is really important. And at the time being, you can make a comparison between what's the difference between data and gut. There is no difference. In 1888, Mr. Dunlop saw his young boy driving a bike, but with strong tires. So his boy was saying, okay, it's fine, it's really joy, but it's hurting. Okay, I'm trying to find a solution. And Mr. Dunlop was a veterinarian. And he touched a horse belly and he said, oh, when you've got hair in intestine, it's flexible. But imagine that, so he built tires, and now we are all using his invention about cats. Imagine that the horse goes to European regulation and says, hey, I want to protect my asset. I don't want to share my intestine to others.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Maybe Armin Greta, BMW. I'll help Natasha on that because it's my area. Well, data sharing is really a key asset of cooperation, and we are doing data sharing a lot in HiDrive and in L3 Pilot in the big projects. We are also doing data sharing for data for road safety. We are driving this project a lot from BMW side. So I think a general say that the OEMs don't share data is the wrong perception, maybe. On the other hand, there are also things which we are analyzing for the sake of our own cars. That's obvious. And we are also selling data to others to a very low price in the BMW car data. But I don't want to go further now. So we support strongly European mobility data space and all these initiatives. Thanks.
May I react? Because today you've got the Data Act. Fine. But not all actors from the value chain may be able to use it because it's about IoTs. So that means that if we don't have a regulated sectorial enhancement regulation, the risk is that some manufacturers may monetize this data. It will be so expensive that the other actors, energy, mobility actors, assistance operators, insurers, won't be able to provide some useful services to others.
I think we are already starting to discuss the challenges, so therefore it's a very good transition to actually go now to our second part of the session, so which will be moderated by Tom Alex. So I hand over to him, and I will be still watching.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. So the challenging part for me, my name is Tom Alkem. I'm from the Netherlands. I work for Map Traffic Management. And before that, I was with Rijkswaterstaat, so I have long experience working on automated mobility from a road operator's perspective. And I also spent a few years here in Brussels at the European Commission, DG RTD, actually organizing this conference. So it's really nice to be back in this building, in this conference. All of us working in this domain, I think we often get the question, when will we see those automated vehicles? And my response is always, well, depending on what you actually mean, is that we already have them for about 2 decades, or it will take at least another 20 years before you see it. And I think this session really illustrated that there are a lot of different applications and scenarios where you can use automation on roads, whether they are public, private. So I think it's really good that we go into the different applications. So there's not one solution for all that brings you door to door. That will take some time. But I would like to invite 3 panelists to reflect on the fact that we have seen a lot of the opportunities, so the reason why we are doing this. But I would like to hear from the 3 of you what kind of challenges you see there. So I'll invite the 3 of you together. So, and while you're walking up, we have Jessica Uguccioni. You are from the UK, Center for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. We have Martin Russ from Austria Tech. And we have Ben Lowenstein from Waymo. And I have the same question for the 3 of you. So given all the opportunities that you have seen here and heard about the potential impacts if they are deployed right, well, what are the main challenges that you see that need to be overcome? And then I think it would be interesting to see if you could address it from your specific expertise. So for instance, Jessica, if you go first.
Well, the first challenge, oh yes, it's working. I wasn't sure if the microphone would be working. That's step 1. I think from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges is reconciling the desire for harmonization, which has come across so strongly throughout the conference, with equally the really strong need to reflect the voices of cities and responding to the particular needs of different areas. And so from a regulatory point of view, there is this push for national standards and like issuing permits maybe at a national level, but then you speak with like local authorities and rightly they have strong reservations about giving up the existing powers they have to regulate their public transport. They have their own strategies, their own ambitions that they want to continue pushing forward, and they see themselves as quite different to each other. So the idea of centralizing and having harmonized standards can be quite scary from the perspective of individual areas. So I think balancing those interests is a key to success, because if you don't have cooperation, you're not going to get anywhere. But on the other hand, it also leads to sort of difficulties in finding a way forward, because if you listen to everyone, you'll never get consensus, you'll never get everywhere. So you need to balance that quite finely. So I think that's probably my biggest one.
Okay, maybe we'll go to Ben first on that balancing act, because you may have some experience with that.
Hi everybody, Ben from Waymo. I think Jess is spot on. That is really what was on top of my mind. I'd like to zoom out a little bit more and say that this is also, the biggest challenge is also what is the path to commercialization? And from a regulatory perspective, what does that look like? Jess touched on the role that local authorities play in not wanting to give up their authority. It's a really interesting point, and the question that I always get asked is, well, what lessons can we bring over from our deployments in the US? We were the first company to launch a commercial ride-hailing service in Metro Phoenix in the US. What lessons can we learn? The biggest lesson that we really want to share with policymakers here is, just because there's no driver in the vehicle, it doesn't mean you need to upend your entire regulatory architecture just to accommodate for that. Of course, there's going to be the need to work on this, to look at these matters in more detail, but don't upend the entire architecture that you have just because there's no driver. And in doing so, show companies that are looking to deploy what the path to commercialization is going to look like. And I think now is a really crucial time for us all to be working together to really make that happen.
Thank you. Martin?
I think the biggest challenge listening to all the 5 panelists was, are we still there yet in describing what do we mean with a use case? So they are quite different. So there's quite a variety on what we call a use case. So I think we should learn to get clear on that, to have common definition what we're talking about. The other thing what it showed is it's hell important that we do that, because a use case reduces complexity that we are actually able to handle. So I think this is my second learning. This is coming through all the 5 presentations. But when we do this now, it's still a little bit what our French colleague was presenting, I think, hundreds of tests of somehow the same thing. They're all kind of different. They're happening with same vehicles, but different actors. So it's not just the actor that is doing the use case, it's the actors behind. And the actors are learning. And we as a community here today in Brussels, nice that we talk about that, but we need the hundreds and thousands out there that are able to share this learning, and not just the big companies. And I think to be able to share the learning, it's really having common objectives, clear results. What we learn from some big companies, that you need objectives and key results. And where are our common objectives and clear results that we are sharing? Because when you ask different people, it's something else, but we need to align and I think those kind of goals between the different groups. Otherwise, there is no development pathway then coming from the scatter plot of use cases to kind of path cases and deployment pathways of the different use cases.
Okay, I hear you saying a couple of things. Maybe one of the things you said on reducing complexity could be a nice bridge to the next question that I have, because I was not intending to make it an easy afternoon for you. I don't want that we all leave this afternoon thinking that automated mobility is really, really complex, which it actually is. It's really, really complex. But I have a feeling that you also have some ideas on how to actually address those challenges that you mentioned. So maybe reducing complexity could help in setting first steps. Jessica, could you maybe elaborate on that?
I think building that evidence base and showing people that automation can actually make a difference and there are some gains from deploying it is absolutely the first step to also get people to come on board with the regulation. So I think it's part of that building consensus element, as well as improving what we're regulating. Because I mean, I hear, when you say, Martin, that we need to have more consistency in the data we collect, but you don't know what you don't know. And so at the beginning, having a bit more diversity and variety can help us see what different pathways are. And then there is a time for convergence, but I think we're not quite necessarily there at this point where the technology is still proving itself both in the use cases and does it actually deliver, the safety gains that we're all hoping it will, and then how safe is safe enough, that big question where how do you demonstrate that you're actually delivering? Because the success metric is improving safety, but you don't want to wait for fatality or to have those extreme elements. So how can we demonstrate that we're not making congestion worse or having sort of the broader effects as well as safety? They're all difficult questions, and we need evidence and information, and these use cases can be part of building that evidence. So like it was great to also hear the work of the JRC and others in terms of building that evidence base so that we can move forward together.
Okay, maybe Ben, you can reflect on that because you have some experience with, it's not simple, I would say, but with a dedicated area with a service. And how do you build that evidence so that you are able to scale up and convince?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Look, we've spent a lot of time, I think, over the last 2 days talking about the challenges that regulators and governments have created. I think, there is also an onus on industry to build the evidence base that Jess is talking about. I'm really proud of Waymo's transparency record and the work that we are doing as a thought leader on safety. And safety is at the core of our mission in everything we do. We were the first company to submit a voluntary safety self-assessment to NHTSA back in 2017. And since then, I'd encourage all of you to jump onto waymo.com/safety. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll find a series of academic papers there that we have produced. Just to call out a couple of these, in 2020 we published our Safety Methodologies and Readiness Report, which we've shared with Biagio and a number of regulators around the world. And that goes through the methodologies that we look at before we can confidently say that a fleet of vehicles is ready to be deployed. So that's number one. Number two, another paper that I'd like to call out is our Fatal Crash Reconstructions paper. So in the area where we first deployed our commercial operations in the Metro Phoenix area in Arizona, what we did is we looked at tragic fatal collisions that took place in the 10 years before we got there. We took the data from the police that was available to us, and we reconstructed through simulation all of those fatal crashes. We then substituted the actors in those accidents with the Waymo driver, and we saw what the results were. And I'd really encourage you to take a look at this because, as we talk about building a credible evidence base, if we were the initiator of the accident, we would have avoided 100% of the accidents. Where we were the respondent to the accident, we would have avoided a significant portion of them, or at the very least mitigated 100% of them. Now, the other crucial thing to note here is that some collisions would have been unavoidable. And this is also something that we're going to need to take into account of as we start thinking about, as we continue thinking about the big question of how safe is safe enough. So again, there is this onus on companies like ours to be thought leaders as well as innovators and make sure that we're contributing to these public conversations in a meaningful way that can help, Biagio and his colleagues set the standards that we as a society are going to be happy with autonomous vehicle deployers like Waymo meeting.
Martin, do you have any solutions?
Always.
Share them.
I think what Jessica was pointing out, and also Penn, I think it's the common evidence basis. And I think coming back to my first comment, when I take a look on the shuttles, you said, okay, EasyMile, Navia's almost 70% all over the place here in Europe and worldwide. But in every case, I think we collected data differently. Maybe Navia and EasyMile, of course, collected their data, hopefully in the same way. Yeah? But all the other involved actors, they did something else. So I think they learned different kind of angles. And so I think this clear evidence is then on what kind of data are you interested in? So is it more you enhance maybe the vision capabilities together with some partners? You're into infrastructure support. How exactly do you do this with CITS messages or 5G or whatever? So what exactly is done to enhance and enrich those basic functionalities of always the same thing. And I think we are not doing this. We are not collecting this data and analyzing this data. And I'm not saying we should share this data amongst all the companies, but I think this is important research data. I think there's a research community here that should be, let's say, operated in this way maybe. This can be one solution, to be more open towards the research community and create these common learnings. And I think this is maybe also something then that we can do on a global basis. And with the GRC, I think we have a good coordinator for such a thing here in Europe, for instance. I think it's maybe one idea that we can do. The other thing is, of course, when we test and do these risk mitigation things, also there, I think we have in Austria also these use case test exemptions, where we try to look into risk mitigation, because in the end, when you deploy a certain shuttle or whatever, it's always about trust that you have to create as a legislator. And I think it's a common risk mitigation procedure that you can install for each kind of use case, because this is the baseline also for the learning. And the other thing is then, we are just talking then about the challenges for the use cases, but what are the key ingredients of a use cases? Of course, it's always a shuttle, it's a vehicle, but what else? So what do we need? And we have no common terminology or systematic approach for that. I think this is needed. Otherwise, you create evidence for something you don't know how this animal look like, and you want to collect some data about it.
And do you then also mean that we need to clearly describe what the shuttle is used for? So rather than a demo of the technology, that is actually delivering a service? Is that part of the...
I would aim for that. I think it's making it clearer if you run for safety enhancement or if you run for inclusiveness and access. And we should be clear on what's our target and goal.
But that also means that for different...
I have to intervene
there.
Go
ahead.
I think they're not alternatives necessarily, and inclusiveness and accessibility and those aspects they're not something that would be one aim of one and one aim of the other. But I think it's great to measure both, and I think that's absolutely important. So I just wanted to...
Yeah. Thanks, absolutely, fully agree.
Thank you for that intervention. I would like to go to some of the panelists also to ask, in their experience, what kind of solutions do you see to certain challenges? I had an order in mind, but Biagio, I see your hand, so go ahead.
Yes, Jersey was mentioned several times, so I think it is good to follow up. So first of all, thanks for the trust. We try to do our best, but I think clearly all things that have been mentioned are absolutely reasonable. I think the opportunity that we have now with respect to what we had in the past is that vehicles can be put on the market. No, this is the fact that we have a type approval legislation in a way introduce a level of trust that we didn't have before. And what we have seen in the test that now we started to carry out with some in some of the projects, but also like for example in the show, but also ourselves, is that the demo vehicles that we see on the road are not there, so will not be able to get a type approval. So are not yet at the level of the requirements that are in the type approval. In the approval legislation, especially for the urban case, we introduce a requirement which is the first of its kind worldwide for the manufacturer to also somehow show that that vehicle in the ODD for which has been designed and will be put on the market will be able to be safer than let's say the current average situation in that ODD. So all this is to create this layer of trust that is needed for market introduction. So all these KPIs are absolutely necessary, will be necessary in the future to continue building on this trust. But we need market vehicles, things to put in the market, not only demonstration, because demonstration may not be sufficiently mature in order to have KPI which are satisfactorily representing the potential of this technology. And there will be a big gap between what we today see on our demonstration around Europe and what will be mature enough to be type approved and put on the market. And here, however, I have to add another challenge. And this challenge was clearly highlighted this morning in a panel discussion. And I think all the members, but in particular, the Dutch type approval authority raised that if we want to have type approval of a vehicle at European level, so not at the national level, the type approval authority needs to test and demonstrate, for example, that the vehicle is able to comply with traffic rules in all member states. This is a challenge because this means that the type approval authority should easily go to another member state and test. And there is no framework in this moment for this. And here we really need to urge and act in order to allow at least for type approval that an authority can go to another member state and do tests independently of the local framework, because otherwise it would be just a never-ending process.
Any solutions then on how to do that? So, for instance, the traffic rules that was mentioned before.
We have started discussing. We will have a first discussion with the member state representative of SICAM in a couple of weeks. We will try to understand whether this is possible to do by amending the implementing act, so using the actual type approval legislation for enabling the approval authorities to test in other member states. It is, a bit delicate because we have no previous situations like this. But we have to find out quickly a solution for this.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned the term ODD, so that's a term that I like quite much, but maybe this is a bridge to Ragnhild. Well, first of all, I think it's also important to recognize then that if you look at the performance of a vehicle, you have to take into the consideration the conditions in which it is operating. In your project, you have long-haul logistics, which is really different from a customer journey from home to the office. So can you explain maybe some of the different characteristics that you look into or run into? And maybe do you anticipate that you have any solutions for that?
I don't think we will get any solution, but we will get an enormous amount of challenges we need to find a solution for. To start with the corridor, driving through 5 countries on a highway has an enormous amount of ODD challenges. So what we will do is to define the pain points, both from a road authority and an OEM perspective, and of course also for the logistics perspective. And in this area, we will pick out a few, and then test and find solutions how to overcome the barriers. But in 3.5 years. We won't solve all of them, but yeah, there's an enormous amount of challenges, and I just wanted to have a comment on what is a use case, because the use case are, it's a way of splitting up the elephant. But what's the elephant? And I think it's important that we have a common taxonomy. I think it's important that we have projects like Sunrise, and I would really love them to start much earlier than our project, so that we can depend on the taxonomy they are developing. And I think many of the European projects are developing their own taxonomy. So I think that's a challenge, and that goes to you. So, I think that would be a very good place to start.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So Modi is creating trouble then in the next years. Let's see if we can find some solutions there. On the taxonomy, the FAME project is actually working on that, on a unified taxonomy. So I think that is a place where we can look for that. But you also mentioned something interesting. So basically, you go step by step. And sometimes I see let's say, how do we find the balance to go step by step? But there's also this urgency. I mean, if there is an urgency to get the bus, you run, so you take a bit more risk. So on the path to commercialization, how can we take a bit more risk, or shouldn't we? Maybe that's a good question for an insurer to answer. Or maybe not.
How many? Ben was talking about scientific studies. In your opinion, how many scientific studies are there about autonomous vehicles?
Well, there aren't too many because there are not a lot of commercialized automated vehicles.
Roughly?
5.
100,000 studies on autonomous vehicles. And how many of these studies about usage, about use cases, but from a user perspective?
I have a feeling that you know the answer, so I'm not going to take the test.
Fine. 185, less than 200. That's why our community said there are many actors working about technologies, and that's perfect. But what about focusing, and that you mentioned it, that's fine, about what are the pain points, what are the main users, and don't think about only the people aboard the car, or it's about the citizens, the inhabitants around, it's about the elected officials, it's about companies, associations, multimodalities. So I think that one of the key, we talked already about business models, about maybe mixing people and goods, that's also a key issue. But I think that security first, but customers first also.
Okay, a lot of people first. So, Dr. Choi, you mentioned something in your presentation. I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but did you actually change the infrastructure to facilitate automated driving? Did I actually hear you say that you removed some roundabouts?
Oh, okay. So actually, there is a top secret from my grandfather, by the way. So actually, we are thinking about the VRU, the safeties, and then the VRU safeties coming from the infrastructures, especially from the the VTEX infrastructures. So that is why we are deploying the CITES services, but also to the 5G networks, which is based on the UU interfaces. So actually, most of the VRUs got the normal devices, I mean the mobile phones. So we are utilizing their mobile phones to providing the safety messages, and then to sharing some kind of the status messages between the VRUs and the automated shuttle operators, so that we can, the warning some kind of the, okay, so the automated shuttle is coming, and then the VRU is just coming from the hidden point. That is why we can, utilizing the infrastructure to, protect or improving the road safeties.
Okay, so you are improving or adapting the infrastructure that you have, and mostly in a digital manner. But changes in the physical infrastructure, were they also made?
Well, we are thinking about how can the change in the physical infrastructure also, but we are not tested yet. But we are planning to, the physical infrastructure also, the developed or supported for the near futures.
Yeah, go ahead.
About business models and infrastructure. In our experiment in France, in the rural area, it's on open roads, and you've got trees. And in the winter, trees don't have leaves. And now, with spring, it's coming. But it's changing the way for my autonomous vehicle. So we could have imagined a 5G satellite geolocalization. Fine. But a frugal infrastructure solution, imagined by Vinci, was to put every 50 meters a pole, a physical one. So whatever raining, snowing, or leaves falling, she's always knowing where she is.
But there are costs associated with these kind of solutions, and so maybe I can ask Martin to reflect on this, since you have extensive experience with this.
I think in all the different use cases that we actually see and that they are tested, I think this is digital infrastructure, physical infrastructure somehow coming together. I think across Europe, and I think the US maybe even more, we avoid to touch the infrastructure sometimes. I think, of course, as mentioned, it's the costly part. The other thing is, I think there will be in the next days a report from IRF where we all many contributed on the infrastructure perspective of automated mobility, so hardware, data, connectivity, and I think there's a lot in there. But again, it's defined by the use case what you really need, and again, so what can we use in common? But I think it's to go for the markings and all that stuff. Yes, of course, if you do some really future plannings, then do it. But that you refurb all your infrastructure with all these nice ingredients, I think this will just not happen. Not on the highways and for sure not in the cities. And I think but maybe this is exactly where there are the experts figuring these out in practice. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's coming back to your point, Martin, about use cases. Let's talk about the use cases, right? Is it supposed to be a level 4 system? Is the human being, back to the user-centric point that you were making earlier, is somebody supposed to sit in the driver's seat or not, right? That is a key question. And that is a key question from a regulatory perspective as well, which I think some governments are still grappling with. So if they're not expected to sit in the driver's seat, they're a level 4 system, so the vehicle is capable of handling the dynamic driving task itself. In that circumstance, the vehicle is not reliant on external infrastructure in order to carry out the DDT. So I think one of the things that we need to pump the brakes on a little bit is this idea that we need a smart city connected infrastructure in order to roll out autonomous vehicles. In Phoenix and San Francisco, what we've been telling the cities to do, please maintain your roads. And if possible, we're going to tell you if some of the roads aren't maintained and where we think that perhaps more investment can be made. That's it. Now, I'm not saying that if Brussels one day were totally connected with a really sophisticated smart grid, that if Waymo decided to deploy here, that we wouldn't use it. Of course we would. Of course we would. Who wouldn't? But the point is that we need to come back to what the use case is designed to be. And if it is a level 4 system that doesn't require a human being to intervene in the driving task in its ODD, then that's exactly what we need to focus on.
Okay, thanks. And I was going to say, but if you could have one desired feature in the infrastructure and you wouldn't have to pay for it because road operators would pay for it, what would it be?
If there was one desired thing that we would want, I would say it would be something to help us manage the flow of traffic and to clear out parked cars from city centres, because that is, I think, something where we could really work together. Now, that is obviously a bit of a pipe dream at this point, but how can we better think about urban planning? It is far too soon for me to, come up and say, Waymo thinks this is exactly how this should be done. But if I'm gonna give you my slightly unattainable wish for the time being, that would probably be it.
All right, managing the curb. Ragnhild, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a logistics perspective to whether it's a driver or not, because in the logistic chain, it's a lot of activities which are not about driving. It's a lot of terminal operations and various activities. So where is it most applicable introducing automation? And I think that's one of the big questions, and that's why we also need these pilot projects. You need to define the pain points, you need to define all the activities. if you introduce automation, you cannot or you shouldn't proceed making the same processes as today. You should also develop the working processes, for instance, tolling. And we need to build, the pilots need to build upon each other. And I think we have a long way to go there to coordinate the projects, and FAME has a very important role there. Sorry, I forgot you on the taxonomy side.
No, that's okay.
I should. And we need these pilots, and we need to have the possibility for failure. And we normally, if we have disappointing results, it's defined as a failure, but it isn't. It is just, this is, I'm talking from a research perspective. And a disappointing result is a very important research result, because that might be a conclusion that this is not the way to go. So you need to pilot and you need to fail.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And when things go wrong, it's a great opportunity to learn from that. Before I open the floor to the audience, Natasha, maybe one more question for you. You showed a trip that looked rather complicated. What part of that trip do you think is the most complicated one to address?
The urban.
In an automated manner.
Yeah.
Yeah, the urban way.
Yeah, intersections, many road users, a lot of complex scenarios, yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's not a bad idea, Henriette, what you mentioned, to park the car then at the border of the city center and continue. So, as we are approaching the final 8 minutes of this session, I would like to open the floor for any questions. This is the opportunity. Joost, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the environment, for the good inspiration. One question I still have in my mind and did not have an answer to that is on digital twins. And maybe Martin or some others could comment on that. I see a lot of OEMs and other, I would say, instruments copying the physical outlet, physical environment through digitalization and digitization and having it in their own cloud. So everybody is building cloud things. Is there no way to share the basic layer of information with everybody, like we have the mobility data space? So instead of everybody reinventing and re-clouding the whole thing, that at least the minimum minimorum outprint could be in a common cloud, where to everybody builds then their own specific competitive edge use cases. I don't know if that exists, but just an idea. I don't know who wants to comment.
Maybe if you have addressed me a little bit, I think the mobility data spaces has to help on that, for sure. The other thing is the digital twins. A digital twin always has a functionality. And when we talking about the different players having different digital twins, then they are for totally different functions. When a highway operator is doing a digital twin or a car manufacturer, this is something totally different. One times it's asset, the other thing is production and certification processes maybe. I think this is, maybe there's common denominators, there's common ways on where we have those touching points then between all these kind of digital layers or twins or how we call them. And of course, same reference systems would help. Huh? So I think the power of location in there and the role maybe then of the map makers, like the Japanese example with the dynamic map company and stuff like that. I think something similar, but maybe not as an own company, but with really a mutual will and ability to share these common information somewhere. But of course, you only share if you can use it. And I think this is then working on the common perspectives on what's in there for me, why should I give my part? So I always have to get a bigger part back. But I think this is possible.
Yes, I wanted to, a bit follow up on Jo's question, comment, but also on Ben's what Ben said before. I think we have to be realistic. I mean, we are entering, hopefully, very, very soon, let's say, an era in which we will have automated driving systems. So we can say the ADS era. But the target should be the CCAM era, no? Because this is what we want to see. Vehicles that are integrated in a multimodal transportation system and contribute to address the mobility needs of people. No? And then this is the overall objective that we have in general as Commission, but as a society. We cannot expect that everything will be available and ready from the beginning. So Ben is clearly right that they cannot do elsewhere than relying on their own sensors. They cannot rely on infrastructure at this stage. Of course, by relying on themselves, this is the level zero. It is necessary to enter the market to deploy, and for sure, again, deployment is extremely important to gain experience, to improve, etc. Of course, any service that you put on top of this with the infrastructure, with the integration into the transport system, will help improving the mobility, the overall mobility system in general. We cannot expect that we deploy automated driving system that will make traffic flow more efficient or to reduce the vehicle kilometers traveled, simply because they are not designed for doing this. When they will be integrated into a CCAM perspective, and CCAM we are talking about the connected, cooperative, automated mobility. Automated mobility means something which is completely different from what we have today, in which we have a need, and somehow, in an automated way, this need is addressed.
Muted. Okay. Well, we have 3 minutes left, so we have time for either one more question from the floor, or I will... Yeah, Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I could ask lots of questions. I'm sure you know. I guess one direct question to Ben. I'm surprised. Do you not think that data for road safety is then a useful application? And if you were operating in Europe, would Waymo be a part of it? But I guess the other thing that I'm struck on, and I think we're always struck on, is, how can I put it? We have 20,000 deaths a year in the EU, about 30,000 deaths across the whole of Europe, and of course many seriously injured. So that, again, I think should put it in a context. This is an urgent task. Now I contrast that with, it's about, the perfection is the enemy of the good. And so I can think of a number of occasions, I think, Tom, you remember the truck platooning challenge on Sambre, where there's a concern, a legitimate concern, that if we follow all of the traffic rules that we currently have too strictly, actually the system will grind to a halt. So we've got a contradiction here, that we're saying that actually we can't allow these vehicles on the road until they can follow all of the laws of all of the countries across the whole of Europe. 90% of those vehicles will probably not leave their own country, trucks being an exception, and the others, again, are we trying to over-egg this and go a bit too far? So what I'm missing from this, I think, is really a sense of proportionality, and maybe it comes back to all your discussion about the user cases. Trucks are not the same as some of the passenger cars, are not the same as Waymo, and I think we've kind of lost that a bit today. So I guess my question to the panel, as I say, Ben, I hope that when you come to Europe, you are joining Data for Road Safety. I hope that you did that connection. But I guess to the other ones is, well, what rules do you think maybe we should be relaxing in the future? Because we're not trying to rebuild the current transport system, as it is, but automated. We're trying to build a future transport system, and therefore not everything maybe should be ported across to the new system.
Thank you very much for the question. I was talking about connected infrastructure. At no point was I wanting to insinuate that not sharing data is a good thing. Again, have a look at waymo.com/safety. Look at the data that we are voluntarily disclosing about contact events that don't even meet the criteria for crash reporting in the US. But because they're with automated vehicles, for the first time, for 1 million miles of public road driving in the US, we are disclosing them. We're talking about all the contact events that we're having. This is exactly the sort of standard that I was describing at the start. If the European mobility data space happens in the next few years and Waymo were to deploy in Europe, of course we would be a participant. This is exactly the sort of thing that we as a responsible company would need to be a part of. What I would say, though, is that the data itself needs to be meaningful. It's not just data for data's sake. It's got to be tied to some sort of safety outcome, whilst also at the same time serving the dual purpose of fostering, more collaborative learning on these sorts of things. So, data is incredibly important, and I'd like to make sure that there's no misconception about that.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, I think I'll give you the last word. Sorry, Biagio, we are out of time.
On the question of the laws and what should be relaxed, I think there's a bit of a mixing of different things, because enforcement and discretion are an absolute part of how we drive today. So if there's a broken down bus, right, the idea is not that you just wait, for it to be carried away. You might be there a very, very long time, and you might actually create more of a traffic risk by doing that. But today, human drivers can deal with that, and the enforcement deals with that. So I don't think that the problem is with the laws or necessarily the enforcement. It's to make sure that automated vehicles have a mechanism whereby they can intelligently and reliably deal with it. So I think it's more actually of a challenge on the development side, and of course cooperating on it. But I don't think it's an issue, because drivers today deal with those exact things. It's not like we're saying you should relax the law about driving on the wrong side of the road, although I do live in the UK, so I probably do that all the time. But you do already enable changes, and humans are able to flex that way. So I think it's more of a challenge for the technology rather than a problem with the regulation as such.
Well, thank you for those last words of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for your patience, and let's give a hand to our presenters and our panel. Thank you.